refined carbs are attacking your brain. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? You've just finished a hearty, satisfying lunch, but barely an hour later, your stomach starts growling uncontrollably all over again. It's incredibly common, isn't it? Or right after eating, this overwhelming wave of fatigue hits you out of nowhere. Your brain feels like it's stuffed with cotton. Your vision gets a bit blurry, and you can't even focus enough to read a simple email. Exactly, then when this happens, you usually blame yourself. You think, yo, I am being greedy again. I have absolutely no self-control. We are so used to attributing these moments to personal moral failings or weak willpower. But what if this has absolutely nothing to do with self-discipline? Absolutely nothing. What if that fatigue, that brain fog, and that unstoppable hunger are actually desperate biochemical alarms? It's your brain crying out because it is under a literal chemical attack. Welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are taking you on an exploration that will completely overturn everything you thought you knew about health. Get ready to reshape your concept of wellness. On our table today is an incredibly hardcore, even shocking medical and metabolic presentation. This material was produced by the health promotion charity Vita Choice Ltd. The content is rock solid, curated by Benny Spirit and co-produced by Notebook LM and Dawn Spirit. It is not just tightly structured, it is a massive wake-up call for modern society. Indeed, this material compiles a wealth of cutting-edge evidence from clinical neurobiology and metabolic research. It has one core mission: to completely shatter the traditional myths surrounding type R diabetes. Conventional wisdom tells us that type R diabetes is just a disease of eating too much, moving too little, slowly getting fat, and aging, the disease of old age. Most people think being overweight is the cause, and the disease is the result. But the data from Vita Choice tells us that this is completely wrong. Today, the core task is to reveal a chilling biochemical countdown timer, one that starts the very moment you take your first bite of food. We are going to take a microscopic look at exactly what happens inside your body from that very first bite of refined carbohydrates. Phase E, the 0 hour to day E, the spark and the leaky gut. The root of the entire disaster is that first bite of refined carbs, characterized by a specific technical term, the cellular carbohydrates. What does that actually mean? If you eat a natural apple versus a slice of highly processed white bread, isn't it all just carbohydrates and calories to your body? That is the single biggest misconception in modern nutritional science. The mind-blowing difference between refined carbs and natural carbs isn't the calories, it's their physical and cellular structure. Imagine eating a natural apple. Its carbohydrates are tightly locked inside plant cell walls and coarse fibers. It's a beautifully packaged bundle. To your digestive system, it is like placing a solid oak log into a fireplace. It takes a long time to burn, releasing steady, sustained energy. This corresponds to a smooth, gradual rise in blood sugar. But industrially processed bread or pastries, they don't burn like that at all. The industrial manufacturing process brutally obliterates all fiber structures. The cellular carbohydrates are pure sugar stripped of any physical barriers. If natural carbs are an oak log, the cellular carbs are dry leaves soaked in gasoline. The moment you swallow them, they require zero digestive buffering. They hit your gut and instantly explode, obliterating your bloodstream's safe upper limit for blood sugar, like a bomb going off. Remember, over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, our digestive systems have never had to face such an unbuffered, violent chemical onslaught. Our bodies simply aren't engineered for this sudden explosion. So what happens after that initial shockwave? In those first few hours during today, a terrifying chain reaction occurs inside the gut. The high-density sugar acts like toxic chemical fertilizer dumped onto soil. It rapidly reshapes your gut microbiome. It happens incredibly fast. This pure sugar is the ultimate fuel for harmful, inflammatory bacteria. They begin to multiply frantically, suffocating the beneficial bacteria. Once the bad bacteria take over, this acute imbalance causes the permeability of your intestinal wall to increase. In plain English, your gut starts leaking. The gut is supposed to let nutrients in and keep the bad stuff out. But once the gut leaks, items that should never enter your bloodstream slip right through. This brings us to a critical, lethal medical term: metabolic endotoxemia. Think of those exploding bad bacteria as an enemy army. When these bacteria die and decompose, their cell walls leave behind a toxic debris called lipopolysaccharides (LPS). Normally, these toxins are blocked by the gut barrier, but because the gut is now leaking, these LPS toxic fragments flood into your bloodstream like a burst dam, straight into the blood. The VitaChoice material explicitly points out that this massive influx of toxic fragments is the true core trigger for type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. This is spine-chilling. It means within hours of eating that piece of refined cake, your gut defenses have completely collapsed, releasing toxins into your blood. Where does that toxic blood go next? Phase R, day 2 day 7, the attack on the brain following the bloodstream. These toxins go straight to the most sophisticated and fragile organ in the human body, the brain. This is why the real crisis happens long before you ever gain weight. Conventional wisdom dictates that people get fat first. Fat accumulates, metabolism breaks down, and then you get diabetes. But this data shows the most lethal danger hitting the brain in the first week of exposing it to refined carbs. Treating obesity as the starting point of the disease is one of the most dangerous misunderstandings in modern medicine. At this incredibly early stage, you haven't even gained weight yet, but the LPS toxins have already reached the perimeter of your brain. The brain has a powerful fortress wall called the blood-brain barrier, designed to keep toxins out of brain tissue. But under the combined chemical assault of LPS toxins and spiking blood sugar, that fortress wall cracks. Those toxins leak directly into the brain, seeping right in. This precisely explains the post-meal brain fog, that sluggish thinking and lack of focus. That inability to focus isn't because blood is rushing to your stomach to digest food. The reality is acute neuroinflammation triggered by a leaking blood-brain barrier, exposing your brain directly to toxins. Your brain is actively on fire. What about mood crashes? Sometimes after a junk food feast, you feel inexplicably depressed, anxious, or even tearful a short while later. This, too, is the result of brain inflammation. And the mechanism is unforgiving. Neuroinflammation spreads rapidly across damaged networks to the hippocampus, our center for memory and emotion. The presentation highlights a highly alarming research conclusion. Those unexplained mood drops are biochemically driven by the physical shrinkage of the hippocampus. Just a few days of refined carbs and junk food can physically shrink your memory center. Extensive clinical neurobiological imaging confirms it. The storm of inflammatory cytokines directly kills neurons, leading to a reduction in hippocampal volume. This physical damage to the brain happens years before you see the first roll of fat around your waist. We are all staring at the bathroom scale, completely oblivious to the fact that our brains are already under siege. Furthermore, your interoceptive system collapses during this time. Interoception is the brain's ability to perceive the body's internal state, knowing if you are truly thirsty, hungry, or full. Under toxic assault, the number of glucose transporter proteins, specifically GLUT-E, which carries sugar into brain cells, drops drastically. If GLUT-E proteins are like delivery trucks bringing fuel to brain cells, a drop in their numbers means the brain cells are starved of fuel. The cellular engines, the mitochondria, shut down due to lack of fuel. It gets worse. The vital protein used to repair neuron damage, called brain-derived neurotrophic factor (BDNF), also plummets. It's like cutting off the fuel supply and firing the maintenance crew at the same time. Your brain essentially goes blind. You might have just eaten a massive, multi-thousand-calorie meal, but because the fuel trucks can't get in, the brain never receives the energy signal. It genuinely believes you are starving to death. Phase 3, weeks to months, the metabolic lockout. This is where the timeline shifts to weeks and months. Entering stage 3, metabolic lockout. Think of your body as a malfunctioning bank vault. It allows you to frantically deposit money, but the security system is fried. You can never withdraw a single cent. For anyone who has ever felt deeply guilty about not being able to control their eating, listen closely. By this stage, overeating is entirely removed from being a psychological issue or a lack of willpower. In this lockout phase, chronic sugar overload forces your pancreas to work in overdrive. Because blood sugar is constantly high, it pumps out massive amounts of insulin. During this high-pressure process, cells generate a massive amount of reactive oxygen species, ROS. Don't let the name fool you. Think of ROS as toxic exhaust fumes blasted out by an overworked cellular engine. This toxic exhaust causes continuous cellular damage. Next, your liver begins accumulating fat, triggering fatty liver disease, and chronic inflammation solidifies across the body. At this point, you are in a state of hyperinsulinemia, chronically high insulin. Excessively high insulin acts like a ruthless dictator. It forces the body into a strict storage mode. It locks away every calorie you eat as fat, and physically blocks your body from breaking down existing body fat. Meaning even if you have 30 pounds of stored fat on your body, you cannot access a single ounce of it for energy. You are physically locked out. The fat is locked away by insulin. While on the other side, the brain's fuel truck still can't get through. The brain still thinks it's starving. This is a completely inescapable trap. This is the brutal reality behind emotional eating. Because your brain cannot use your fat storage for fuel, it enters a state of cellular famine. To survive, it overrides your conscious mind with overwhelming, primitive emotional drives, forcing you to seek out the fastest source of energy available, glucose. It's not a craving, it's a neurobiological mandate for survival. Walking to the fridge like a zombie at midnight for sweets, or desperately craving a sugary milk tea at 7 p.m. is your damaged brain executing a maximum priority self-preservation command. This is not a moral flaw. The brain's control center is damaged, satiety is lost, revenge eating follows, more toxins enter the blood, systemic inflammation worsens, the brain is damaged further. A perfect pathological vicious cycle closes its loop entirely in secret. Phase 4. Months to decades to the final verdict and delayed judgment. Now the timeline slides to the final act. Months to decades later. The final verdict. Looking at the clinical criteria mentioned in the Vita Choice presentation reveals a vital truth. When a doctor looks at your lab results, points to a fasting blood glucose of 7 美元, ring text mol or higher, or an HbA1c of 6 美元, and tells you that you have type 2 diabetes, most people think that day is day of their illness. That is the most heartbreaking part. If we look at that diagnosis day through the timeline we just broke down, you realize that clinical diagnosis is an incredibly indicator. By the time your fasting blood sugar finally breaches that medical diagnostic threshold, your body has already experienced systemic receptor shutdown. Your cells, trying to protect themselves from being choked to death by excess energy, have changed their locks. They refuse to accept insulin anymore. On the day you get your diagnosis, your blood vessels, your nervous system, and your brain have already been operating in this toxic crisis mode for 5 to 10 years. The organ damage was quietly finalized long ago. Diagnosis isn't the end, it's a gateway to cascading crises. Your sympathetic nervous system stays chronically activated to cope, constricting blood vessels and causing stubborn, systemic high blood pressure. But the most shocking revelation in this data is how the medical community defines the end of this timeline. Alzheimer's disease is essentially type 3 diabetes. The biochemical logic behind this is terrifyingly airtight. Remember the blood-brain barrier breached by LPS toxins years ago? Because it has suffered chronic, permanent leaking, a toxic waste called beta-amyloid plaque begins to accumulate around neurons. Simultaneously, the brain develops the exact same insulin resistance seen in the liver and muscles. The brain loses its ability to harvest energy, alongside its ability to protect and repair neurons. It's a massive butterfly effect. It starts decades ago with a single bite of the cellular carbohydrates causing a leaky gut, which lets LPS toxins breach the brain's walls, culminating in an unquenchable fire in the brain that destroys memory, dignity, and mind through Alzheimer's. Furthermore, the presentation warns that a chronic high insulin environment acts as a powerful catalyst for abnormal cell growth, significantly driving up the risk of metabolic-related malignancies like colon and breast cancer. This isn't fear-mongering, it is verified pathology. The self-rescue guide Science Over Suffering. Hearing this might make you shudder. You might feel hopeless, like you're just watching a biochemical time bomb count down inside you. But there is hope. The Vita Choice team closes this heavy document with an invaluable, hopeful guide for self-rescue. Since diagnosis is a lagging indicator, how do we catch the warning signs early? The key lies in listening to your body's early warnings and capturing those early symptoms. These signals don't take 10 years to show up, they can appear within the very first week of eating poorly. You do not have to wait for your lab results to flash red. Let's check the symptom checklist. Post-meal fatigue crashes, acute glucose starvation in the brain because the fuel trucks are blocked. Brain fog and scattered focus, an inflammatory distress signal from a leaking blood-brain barrier. Not just a bad night's sleep. Unexplained mood drops and anxiety, your hippocampus crying out for help under toxic assault. Rapid hunger after a full meal, your interoceptive system is failing. Your brain is blindfolded. Stubborn belly fat despite thin limbs, the insulin tyrant has initiated metabolic lockout. Storing everything as fat. Morning fatigue, waking up exhausted no matter how long you slept means your cellular engines, your mitochondria are compromised. The data emphasizes that if you catch these signals, or if your labs show you are in pre-diabetes fasting blood glucose between 5美元6 text and 6.9 text mol. Do not ignore it just because you haven't crossed the official line. This is your prime window to break the chain. If you intervene decisively here, everything can be reversed. This embodies the core value of the Vita Choice organization: science over suffering. Understanding the underlying biochemical mechanisms of this disease is the first step to refusing to be its victim. Do not fall into self-hatred because of occasional overeating. When you realize this is a precise biochemical reaction, a survival instinct triggered by a hijacked brain rather than a personal moral flaw, you shed the baggage of guilt. Accurate knowledge is your strongest shield to reclaim control over your health and take back your sovereignty. Deep gratitude goes to the health promotion charity Vita Choice Ltd, curator Benny Spirit, and the production teams at Notebook LM and Dawn Spirit. They did not use hidden academic jargon to lock the public out. Instead, they translated complex clinical neurobiology into an undeniable wake-up call for the modern world. They traced an entire scientific evidence chain from the first bite of a cellular carb causing a leaky gut like gasoline on a fire, to LPS toxins breaching the brain's walls, to insulin tyrants locking down metabolism, and finally to cognitive loss decades later. It is a profound interrogation of our modern lifestyle. Before closing this exploration, one final question remains to ponder every day. We make decisions about what to eat, and we use those choices to judge our own self-control. But if over the past several decades, the massive refined carbohydrate industry has hijacked your brain's circuitry for desire and fullness at a molecular level, when you stand in front of the fridge at midnight, filled with guilt, reaching for that piece of cake, is it truly your noble free will making that choice? Or is it the biochemical toxins lurking in your gut and bloodstream issuing orders in your place? It is a question worth carrying with you. Use it to look closely at the next thing you put on your plate. Reclaim your body's sovereignty.